Coming up on this episode of Latinas, we celebrate one of the most important days for Latinos, the Day of the Dead. We'll talk politics and the importance of our vote, and so much more. Latinas starts now. Welcome to Latinas, the show that's all about nosotras, created by nosotras. I'm Tina Beth Pina. Today, I'm at Greenwood Cemetery, a National Historic Landmark in Brooklyn with over 500,000 graves on more than 400 acres. It memorializes the dead while simultaneously bringing to life the art, history, and natural beauty of New York City. Every year, Greenwood celebrates the rich history associated with the Mexican holiday Dia de los Muertos, also known as the Day of the Dead, and we'll learn more about that later in the show. But first, October is that time of year when horror movies make their debut at the box office, and the Scream Queen has been a staple in that genre. But Latinas have been noticeably absent in these iconic roles, right? Correspondent Isabel Ortiz explores how Jenna Ortega is stepping into the spotlight and what the rise of this Latina Scream Queen means for the genre overall.
The Scream Queen has always been a staple in horror, but Jenna Ortega is raising the stakes. From The Babysitter's Killer Queen to X, Scream, Wednesday, and now Beetlejuice, Jenna Ortega is elevating Latina representation on screen.
With Jenna Ortega, she is definitely paving the way for Latinas in a very particular kind of genre, for horror. I think it's really important to see her in that role as a protagonist, and showing that, many of these characters, they are beyond a particular ethnicity and a particular culture, right? They can be played by anyone, and that person can have their own twist on that, given their own sort of, personality, acting style.
After an 11-year hiatus, the Scream franchise returned with its 5th installment. Jenna Ortega joined as Tara Carpenter, becoming one of the franchise's first Latina leads in its 25 years.
This isn't funny, Amber.
Would you like to play a game, Tara?
It features primarily strong women, but then also to see strong women of color and us represented in a light that's positive and also leading is, I think, really, really impactful, but then also accurate. That's what the world looks like. Yeah. This is what it is.
Though Ortega's time in Scream has ended, her horror career hasn't slowed down. Now she stars as Wednesday Addams in Netflix's Wednesday, earning her first Emmy nomination and making history as the youngest Latina nominee.
For me, it was the opportunity I can't really think of any other Latin character that has the reach that Wednesday does, or the impact or the love or community that she has. And oftentimes Latin characters are the sidekick or, the daughter of the cartel leader. For me, I love Wednesday because she's weird. People still fall in love with her. They're obsessed with her. But then also she has this bit of representation that I never really had, growing up and watching TV.
Dr. Jillian Baez shared her perspective on how this role and its success are reshaping the narrative for Latinas in media.
She is reviving some of the lesser known archetypes of Latinas in Hollywood. So I think of, for example, the Dark Lady, and certainly with Wednesday, we can see that kind of more darker, edgier character that is less sexualized, right, than many of the images that we see of Latinas. And she is not necessarily the one to be mocked the way that we've seen with other kinds of Latina representations. So I think that that's really paving the way for just new ways of thinking about representing Latinas, and also new ways of thinking about casting.
Jenna Ortega steps into the horror spotlight again in Beetlejuice as Astrid Dietz, Lydia Dietz's daughter, a role famously portrayed by Scream Queen Winona Ryder.
Astrid, I am serious.
We needed Jenna to be born and grow up because she is like such a great, she's like the missing puzzle piece, she's so brilliant.
As more Latinas take on leading roles, I asked Dr. Baez how this momentum might spark change behind the camera.
So I think it's really important for that kind of Latinx storytelling to be told within horror. It's not the only kind of storytelling we need to have, but certainly it should be one of the voices that's there.
As Wednesday heads into its second season, Ortega is taking a seat in the producer's chair, expanding her influence both behind the scenes and in front of the camera.
I've never really done that on a TV show before, and we had talked about it first season, and it's so nice being a part of these conversations because I love what I do and I love my job, but I'm able to be a part of the background stuff. So, you know, I get to decide like how blue somebody's gonna be or where the brains go on the floor. Jenna Ortega isn't just starring in horror, she's rewriting the rules, proving that Latinas aren't just part of the story, they're leading it. For Latinas, I'm Isabel Ortiz.
Shifting gears, while racial equity initiatives have definitely made the New York City school landscape more challenging, youth-led organizations continue to stand and fight for justice and equity in our schools. Correspondent Elena Romero sat down with a CUNY alum who is empowering young people to take a stand.
I was really proud to be a first-gen Puerto Rican queer woman of the diaspora that was going to really support social justice and speak in Spanish with my students who were learning English. But I realized that these students were being segregated and separated into ESL classrooms without their parents understanding that they were, and then they were being disregarded by the school system.
Meet Sarah Medina Camascoli, a former South Bronx ESL teacher who turned youth organizer and lawyer, who founded Integrate NYC 10 years ago.
It was a collective of teachers and students, and essentially what we did was we talked about the gap between justice and law and policy. And we looked at the ways in which young people were being segregated in New York City from multiple different vantage points, from race and enrollment, resource allocation that was happening in unfair ways, teacher representation in the classroom, culturally responsive curriculum, and restorative practices.
According to Medina Camascoli, Integrate NYC is the first organization to convene students across segregated schools to design solutions for diversity and equity in education.
So we entered this scene when there was really a demand for the democratic way of making law and policy for shared space. It's not a complicated, radical concept. If we share in the space, we should share in the legal and policy decision-making processes.
What started with a handful of students has developed into several thousand youth leaders, taking on issues from school segregation to violations of state law.
Today, just the Peer Defense Project alone has over 4,000 youth leaders, trusted adult allies, and organizations that follow the lawsuit and also follow the work of Integrate.
The Peer Defense Project falls in line with the Biden-Harris administration's focus on equity and racial justice. While there's no telling if that charge will continue with a new administration, it remains a top priority at Integrate NYC.
At the Peer Defense Project, what the work looks like is we're continuing to maintain an education campaign called the Know Your Case campaign, so young people fully understand that, while also providing limited scope technical assistance for young people who are in that waiting game of actually seeing change happen, and legal education that teaches actually the lawsuit.
If you had some advice to give young people in schools, what would it be?
In New York, you have rights. And where you don't have rights, you have people who care about you, who will create spaces that are safe and powerful. And the rights that you have are the human rights to not being discriminated against and feel like you're less than. As young people, particularly multiply marginalized young people, become the favorite objects of attack across our country, I encourage the trusted adult allies in this world to just keep demanding that young people are present too.
I'm Elena Romero for Latinas.
This year, the share of Latino voters is expected to reach a record 36 million. That's up almost 10 million since 2016. But how well understood are Latinos as voters and leaders? And what gets Latinos involved to vote and lead? That's the topic of today's Caliente Caliente.
The Latino population is growing, and so with it, so is the demographics of local politics. So I think that we personally need to do a better job at recognizing our power and recognizing the magnitude, recognizing our power in numbers. And I personally think that the Latino vote is really gonna affect change when it comes to the national turnout.
For Westchester County, to your point, it is growing. For someone who grew up in Queens, I think the difference is Dominicans are newer there. But they're, and Puerto Ricans, but Dominicans are moving
they're
there.
moving there.
My dad's New Rican, and so, I think for there, it's like reminding that the Latino umbrella, while not a monolith, can be big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea that we're not a monolith needs to be remembered, right? We're thinking about this kind of round of elections. One of the things that scares me, I'm proud to be Latina, and I'm also proud to be part of a history of Latinas who have been strong, who have led the way, right? Both personally and family, but also professionally. Look at, Congressmember Velasquez.
Yes.
Look at a majority female council with the largest Latina population we've ever seen in the history, right?
Like history of the city of New York.
Wow,
kind of
again,
incredible.
wild.
And they're doing incredible things around maternal health, incredible, right? So super excited to be a part of that. But the thing that keeps me up at night is, I would say two things. One is that we need to be able to get past this, the differences that we think we have, and understand that we're not as different as you think, or that people lead us to believe, and that we're stronger together. But also that we are facing a really tough time nationally.
Yes.
On national elections, presidential, but this is going to continue down the line, where there's this idea that we either have the Latino vote or we don't need the Latino vote, or there's a Latino vote, or wait, Puerto Ricans are different than Puerto Rican, or Cubans in Miami are different than Puerto Ricans in whatever that is, right? And when I think of Latinas, I'm proud to be a part of this incredible group of warrior women who've been doing the work, but I also get nervous about us not coming together in a more kind of substantive way to push back on some of the stuff that we just talked about, and to fight for things like the Equal Rights Amendment.
And I think a huge portion of our population really holds on to the adversity or the belief of our adversities. And when I think about my challenges, I'm like, but my mom had bigger challenges, and I'm concerned about an amendment to a piece of, and so I think that some of us are bogged down with holding on to this burden of our adversities. I can't do this because of this, or no puedo hacer esto because I don't understand this. And it's no, your adversities are literally your superpower. And so when you lean into that, when you bring that experience, that personal experience into the boardroom, into how you vote or who you vote for, it really makes a difference.
If you look at what you've gone through, your skill set, what you've overcome, or even as someone when you knock on the door, and I'm sure we've had this, you knock on the door and it's a woman who speaks Spanish, and she all of a sudden her shoulders drop, and all of a sudden she's talking to you in Spanish, and all of a sudden she's really asking the questions, right? It is interesting because then you see that there is an intent, there is a desire, there is an understanding, but there has to be an intentionality around how we cultivate that. It's our New Rochelle Latino vote, I think the last election was 3.5% or 4%. This year it was 10%. I was it's 10%, but it's better than before. And then we just got to keep hustling for the 15%, for the 20%. Let them trust the process. Let them see us, cultivating younger people to keep us in the loop, but it's an intentionality because those experiences really make a difference. And on the local level, can really make or break policies that have so much direct impact, stuff that you really feel when you walk out your front door.
There's so much power behind the Latino vote, not only in its percentage, but also the population. When you break it down and you look at it, we have the largest youth population within that. So how are we reaching back to the younger generation and encouraging them to understand this, and not just through social media or the sound bites, but to really understand it from a legislative perspective, to understand how it just doesn't impact our generations, but the generations to come.
The woman you just saw told us why voting is important, And if you need more convincing, listen to what Dolores Huerta and Viviana Rivera Burgos have to say about the power of the Latina vote in particular, since we make up almost 20% of the total U.S. population, which shows our influence as a voting bloc overall.
We know that the Latinas are the powerhouse of the family. Yeah, we know whether it's the mother or the grandmother or the tias, the aunts, that they have a lot of influence on the rest of the family. So when we get the women committed to voting, they really set the standard for the entire family.
Latinas have political ideals and preferences that are a little different from Latinos of other genders. Latinas also tend to be more politically active. A lot of them are heads of households. They value women's rights and autonomy.
I'm glad that you are focusing on women because, of course, it was my mother, Alicia St. John Chavez, who was the one that really set the standard for our family. When I reached the age of 21, you had to be 21 before to vote. And she took me right down and she registered me to vote. And of course, I did the same thing with all of my children.
Our community has been underrepresented for a long time. We have a lot of strength in numbers, but it doesn't matter if we don't actually use that power and that strength and go out to vote.
So if we're invisible, we don't get the kind of support that we need. And it's also important so that we can hold the people that we elect accountable to make sure that when we elect them, that they respond to the needs of our community. Again, it's the women that set that standard for the family, and so it's so important that for women to say, tenemos que votar, we all have to vote. This is really, really essential.
Women in general and in other groups in American society as well, Black women, Hispanic, Latina women are more active. In recent years have really turned out to vote in larger numbers.
So if we want to get our revancha, we want to get our revenge, the one way that we can do this is by getting as many people in our family to register to vote and vote.
It's always important to vote and to voice your opinion in other ways as well. There is, at least ideally in a democratic society, there is a link between what people want and what government does. And a lot of that is at stake, reproductive rights. So I think that's one big reason why Latinas should go out and vote.
Yeah, it just takes a couple of minutes to do that. So if we keep informed and we stay active, then we stay young. Sí se puede, sí se puede.
Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is a holiday that's celebrated throughout Latin America from November 1st to November 2nd. This is a time of year when many Latinos come together to remember and celebrate those who have passed. And here at Greenwood Cemetery, celebrating the Day of the Dead has become an annual tradition.
Something that we say in Spanish, la muerte es segura. So death is certain. And we love the fact that during the Dia de los Muertos, we're able to celebrate and honor our loved ones that have deceased and parted. And it's very important to have it here in Greenwood because it's a cemetery that's open for the community. Typically, when we think about cemeteries, we think they're scary. Well, that's not Greenwood. It's a beautiful space that people can come in, and it's a beautiful way for people to celebrate and honor their loved ones. We have a large Latin American community in Sunset Park that celebrate Dia de los Muertos. Greenwood embraces the Latino community. This is a space for them. This is a space where they can honor their loved ones, even if they're far away. I mean, we have a large immigrant community. So it's a space where they can honor them without, having to go back home, or just having a space is so important. We actually bring the whole community together. If you've seen pictures of the event, you see everyone celebrating. And it's not just a certain age, it's from babies to adults, just having a good time honoring their loved ones. We have an ofrenda for pets, which little ones come in and honor the little pets. It could be a little fishy, a doggy. So it's a way of honoring anyone that was special in your life is no longer here. So they bring pictures, they bring what we called ofrendas, they do offerings. We've had occasions where a child brought like their dog's leash and they put it on the ofrenda with a picture. They write notes. So it becomes very intimate. And while they're doing that, it's like connecting them again to that loved one that's not here. For me, it's very important to have Greenwood here because my grandmother's buried here. So every time we have the celebration here, it really connects me back to my time with her. And I have my aunt buried here, and I also have a space here. So to me, it's very important because I feel that once I'm no longer here, I'm going to be buried at the place where we brought everyone together, having this great celebration. Please join us Friday, November 1st at Greenwood Cemetery for our Family Dia de los Muertos Day.
Now, the most universally recognized symbol of Dia de los Muertos is La Catrina, the elegant skeleton with a colorful makeup on her skull face. And Catrina makeup art is an endless source of creativity and inspiration. Makeup artist Stephanie Vasquez is about to show us how we can transform ourselves this month into the iconic Dia de los Muertos Grand Madame.
La muerte es democrática, ya que, a final de cuentas, güera, morena, rica o pobre, toda la gente acaba siendo calavera.
The Catrina was created by an artist, José Guadalupe Posada, in Aguascalientes, Mexico. The Catrina was not made to be part of Dia de los Muertos. At first, it was like more a satiric scene that he built up because he wanna make a kind of joke of the high society of Mexico. That all people, even though they are in the high society, they have a lot of money or they don't have money, everybody's gonna end dying. So with the Catrina, like a high society lady with all this glamour, and make it like a dead person, like a skull. So that's when the story of the Catrina begins. And then it was moved to the Dia de los Muertos. Why they name it Catrina? It's because at that time in the Mexican society, to the gentlemen that were very rich, they called them Catrines. So the feminine for Catrin, Catrina. Like there are different options to make a Catrina, and today we are gonna do the gems. So what we basically did first, I didn't want to do like a completely white face, so I took like her natural color of her skin and I mixed it up with a little bit of white to make it a little more pale. And then I start mapping all my lines. And from that, you can guide and start doing like the eyes, and then you can make the color. So at this point, with this kind of brush, we just start tapping to create like the flower for the Catrina. And then also you have to create the illusion because this is a skull. So you have to cut the contour really deep. So you have to create this illusion, and then after that you just start coloring up and blending. We are gonna do the gems. She's dead, but she's glowy. All Catrinas, they always have like flowers and graphics on their faces, so we are trying to do something here to give like a little bit of that Catrina look. We're gonna do the nose now. And the difference in the nose, you remember that this one is not a clown nose. So you cannot put it all black or all red. So we just have to leave a little tiny in the middle, like a space, so it creates that look of the Catrina. And then I'm gonna have to do this one like this, the teeth. So we are gonna create also the illusion of the teeth because we Latinas are very dramatic. The Catrina, it's very glamorous. So she's always wearing or buns or rather like a very high ponytail with curls. So we have to exaggerate everything because that's the way a Catrina should look. Oh my God, I think this kind of makeup shows a lot of cultural things from Mexico, from all our Latino countries. So I love it. And you will love it too once you do it.
And that's our show for today. For more information on what you just saw, check out our website at tv.cuny.edu and follow our social media profiles. We even have a CUNY TV app now where you can watch us anytime, anywhere, on the go. And you know how we love sharing our Latina stories with you. So definitely check it out and download. And please make sure you tune in next month where you'll meet the owner of a thriving movie theater in Brooklyn. We'll talk gun control and gun safety in our next Caliente Caliente, and so much more. ¡Uepa! Hasta la próxima. Bye-bye.